bibliophiles and those raising bibliophiles. Without ratings and warning labels, finding out which books are appropriate for your children to read is like navigating wild terrain without a map and a compass. I don't know about you, but I have been burned more than once handing my child a book that I thought was clean and appropriate for them to read. I'm a fellow mom, educator, reading specialist, and literary enthusiast trying to find great books for my children and yours to read. So if you're looking for a book review from a real mom with a biblical worldview, then welcome and enjoy this week's book review. This week's book review is Wonderland by Barbara O'Connor. And this is about a developing friendship of two 10-year-old girls named Rose and Mavis. Rose is the young daughter of a wealthy family living in Magnolia Estates in Landry, Alabama. Mavis and her mother are moving to Alabama at the opening of the story, as Mavis's mother has been hired by Rose's family to serve their family, basically cleaning and cooking a lot of the household chores. Mavis and her mom live in a garage apartment, which is the perfect proximity for Mavis and Rose to grow their friendship as they enjoy the adventures of summer. So before I go any further, I'm just going to read a little bit of the opening of the story. And this chapter and the way the story is structured is it goes back and forth between Mavis and Rose. There is a dog, Henry, that's brought up, and so you do get a chapter from his perspective as well. But I'm just going to start with the opening from Mavis, and the chapters are pretty short, about anywhere from 2 to 4 pages. So this is from Mavis's perspective at the opening of the story. Mavis Jeter sat on the bus stop bench beside her mother and whispered goodbye to Hadley, Georgia. She took a deep breath and let out a big heaving sigh to send a signal to her mother that she was tired of saying goodbye. "Why can't we stay here?" she asked every time her mother announced that they were moving. Then her mother would explain how she was sick of podunk towns and God-forsaken places, how she needed a change of scenery, how she had a friend or a cousin or a boyfriend waiting somewhere else. This time they were leaving Hadley, Georgia, so her mother could work as a housekeeper for a rich family in Landry, Alabama. Mavis let out another heaving sigh that blew her tangled hair up off her forehead. Then she leaned forward and squinted down the road. "When's the bus coming?" she asked for the umpteenth time. "Soon," her mother had said, for the umpteenth time. Sometimes Mavis wished she lived with her father in Tennessee instead of just visiting him every now and then. Her father stayed in one place, but then he lived with his mother, who disapproved of Mavis. "That child runs wild," she complained, right in front of Mavis. "Not one lick of discipline from that so-called mother of hers," she'd say, as if Mavis were invisible and not sitting on the couch there beside her. "Let's her run wild," she'd mutter, flinging her arms up and shaking her head. Finally, the bus came roaring up the road, and the next thing Mavis knew, she was watching Hadley, Georgia disappear outside the window. "Goodbye, 4th grade," she whispered when the bus rumbled past Hadley Elementary School. "Have a nice summer," she added. It was only a few weeks ago that kids had hooted and hollered on the last day of school, but now the window shades were drawn in the empty classrooms. "So long, Bilo," she whispered when they passed the grocery store where her mother had worked for a few months, until she came home one day and announced, "I'm not asking paper or plastic ever again." "Adios, best friend," Mavis whispered as they drove past Candler Road, where her best friend, Dora Radburn, lived. Then she let out another big sigh, a big heaving sigh. Actually, now that she thought about it, Dora hadn't really been a best friend. She never saved Mavis's seat at lunch, and she had flat out lied about her birthday party. Maybe if the Jeters stayed in one place long enough, Mavis could have a real best friend. So as the bus turned onto the interstate, Mavis said one final goodbye to Hadley, Georgia, and decided right then and there that in Landry, Alabama, she would have a real best friend. So I'm also going to read just a little beginning of Rose to kind of give you a perspective of her. So this is the chapter for beginning with Rose. Sometimes it seemed to Rose Tully that everything about her was wrong. It also seemed as if her mother reminded her of that nearly every minute of every day. "Don't slouch, Rose," she'd say. "You can't wear that, Rose. Stop slurping your soup, Rose." But even if Rose sat up straight or changed her dress or sipped her soup as daintily as could be, there would still be something wrong. And so it was that on that fine summer morning in Landry, Alabama, with the sun streaming through the dining room windows overlooking the garden, Rose plucked raisins out of her oatmeal and waited for her mother to tell her what was wrong. "Stop doing that, Rose," her mother said. Rose plopped a raisin into her mouth and glanced at her father. Sometimes he would say, "Ah, Cora, cut Rose some slack," but today he didn't. Today he gulped down his orange juice in a way that made Mrs. Tully squint, and then he grabbed his briefcase and hurried out the door without so much as a goodbye. "Hurry up, Rose," Mrs. Tully said. "There's liable to be traffic on the interstate, and I'm not even sure where the bus station is." She took one last sip of coffee and added, "I'm starting to have reservations about this Jeter woman if she doesn't even have a car." "But she's bringing her daughter, right?" Rose said. "Unfortunately, yes," Mrs. Tully said. "I'm not sure this was one of my better ideas." Rose folded her napkin and placed it neatly next to her plate. She didn't say it out loud, but she was hoping that this Jeter woman's daughter was nicer than Amanda Sim. "Wait for me outside," Mrs. Sully snapped. Then she snatched her napkin off the table, gathered plates and bowls and juice glasses with a clatter, and disappeared through the swinging door into the kitchen, leaving a cloud of discontent behind her. When Rose opened the front door, a wave of thick summer heat drifted in and mingled with the icy air conditioning in the foyer. The pleasantly mild days of May had given way to the sultry days of early June, the beginning of a sure-to-be stifling Alabama summer. Rose's house was the biggest one in Magnolia Estates. It had a winding driveway lined with neatly trimmed boxwoods and doorbells that chimed Beethoven's Ode to Joy. On each side of the front door sat a concrete lion, its mouth open in a mighty roar. When the Tullys moved there 2 years ago, Rose had named them Pete and Larry. Out on the porch, Rose patted Pete and Larry on the tops of their head and savored the smell of freshly mown grass. Monroe Tucker, the gardener, had already been there this morning, getting an early start like he always did to beat the midday heat. Because the Tullys' yard was so large, Monroe came 3 days a week, trimming the boxwoods and weeding the gardens and making sure the azaleas were the exact same height, the way Mrs. Tully liked them. Rose ran to the end of the driveway and looked up the road toward the gatehouse. She wished she could visit Mr. Duffy instead of going to the bus station with her mother. She wished she could take him some blackberries to try to cheer him up. She wished she could show him how She wished she could show him how good she had gotten at the magic trick he had taught her. But more than anything, she wished Mr. Duffy's little dog Queenie hadn't died. And so, of their many adventures that Rose and Mavis have together, helping Mr. Duffy is really central. So, Mr. Duffy is the elderly guard at the entrance to the Magnolia Estates, and it's his job to sort of man who's entering the community. However, due to his age and the recent death of his beloved dog Queenie, Mr. Duffy is not doing so well at his job, and the members of the community are really unhappy, Mrs. Tully being primarily one of them. In an attempt to make Mr. Duffy happy again, Mavis has a plan to get Mr. Duffy another dog. So Rose is really unsure of this plan, but she pushes herself out of her comfort zone and joins Mavis on this quest. There are various plots events. The girls come across a dog that is named Henry, who's an ex-racer from the local Greyhound track. In the end, the girls do convince Mr. Duffy to foster Henry, but in the end, their plan does win out, as Mr. Duffy is glad to call Henry his own. Through all their efforts to help Mr. Duffy, Rose and Mavis also have to navigate the ups and downs of friendship and life. So Wonderland overall is a very cute story as the girls are trying to seek and develop friendship. They have disagreements. They also push one another in different ways. Rose is the character who definitely shows the most growth. She's very timid, very much a warrior at the start of the story. She lacks confidence and doesn't feel brave. But towards the end of the story, she shows more courage and bravery as she's able to speak up to herself, especially when it comes to her mother. So one of the things about this story and really talking about mothers, you can see a little bit just from me reading the beginning of the story for Mavis and for Rose that we do have these two different mothers. And the story does present a pretty bad depiction of both mothers, really, and they don't have much development throughout the story. So there are some slight shifts at the end, a little bit, but nothing fully. Rose's mom is very particular about everything in her home and life. She's all about what is proper, what is correct. She doesn't care for things to be dirty or out of place. She's definitely mostly concerned with cleanliness and appearance. She doesn't want things to be an embarrassment. She's very critical and very judgmental. Mavis's mother, on the opposite side, is very complaining, very divisive. She complains about the rich and the poor, the things that sort of separate them. She's really a listless woman. She has no direction. She really drags her daughter from state to state as she's seeking purpose and perfection in her life. Ultimately, this has exposed Mavis to boyfriends of various types that are briefly mentioned. There are mentions of Mavis's father in Tennessee, but he lives with his mother. He doesn't seem to be any more stable or capable of caring for Mavis than the situation she's already in. So in the end, Mavis' mother does end up leaving employment from Rose's family. She begins working as a receptionist for an insurance agency. She does sort of stop complaining at the end as she's giving an opportunity for training and sort of pursuing a career in some aspects with this insurance agency. But other than that, there's not really development in her character. I do want to direct you to my website at holdingsteadfastreaders.com. You are going to get some more details of things that I'm not necessarily going to mention here in this review, some specific things to mention in the story. So definitely go and sort of check those out. There's also some quotes in the story that I share there to kind of give you an idea a little bit more of the story. I really did enjoy this story. So despite the some of the issues with the moms and the fact that Mavis really pushes Rose to be defiant and to lie to her mom, which is not good, right? Like that's not something we want to encourage. But I really did enjoy the story. It was fast paced. It was something you're able to get through really quickly. Mavis and Rose and Henry, it's just a really cute way that she divided up the narration of the story and focusing on each of them. The chapters are also short. So if you've got sort of a younger reader, this is recommended like ages 8 to 12. So definitely that younger side, because the chapters are so short, it makes it very accessible to them and keeps them sort of going. And you get that change in point of view so they don't really get bored. Again, while Mavis is a bold character that helps Rose grow, I don't particularly care for the focus on her deception and encouraging Rose to just break her mother's rules. Rose at time calls her sister Grace, who's older, for advice, and Grace also encourages her to have fun with Mavis and with Mavis's plan. Rose's father is present in the novel physically at times in scenes where he's sharing family meals, but he never directly interferes with Rose or her mother and doesn't really engage in any sort of instruction and teaching in that way. So that's a little, maybe a missed opportunity on some level. I would certainly have liked to see more from him. However, as the story is really focusing on the adventures of these two young girls who feel lonely and left out in social groups, them trying to develop and navigate friendships, I certainly recognize that there's a limited space to develop some nuances in a story. And so if something's not the focus, it probably shouldn't be given time and attention. Nevertheless, this is a clean story, strong focus on friendships, navigating how to give and take in a relationship, how to work through disagreements and feelings. And so, again, I just wanted to make parents aware of some of the portrayals of the mothers and some of the deception that's presented in the story. Again, go to holdingsteadfastreaders.com for more details specific to this particular review. And I hope that was helpful for you as parents trying to figure out which books are appropriate for your children to read. And I hope that you'll join me next week for another book review.